Ranking Member Lindsey Graham for his opening remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've really enjoyed the hearings we've had. I think you raised questions that the country needs to grapple with, and sort of let me give you my view of things. I think Senator McCain, who both of us admired, was a big proponent of trying to make procurement more transparent and cost-plus contracting to really incentivize its spending more. The big problem I've seen with weapon system development is change orders. They'll ask that the weapon system do things down the road they weren't designed to do early on. And sometimes that's due to the threat we face from enemies. We have to adjust our new systems to counter their new systems. But count me in for looking at procurement reform and giving the Pentagon a good once-over in terms of its modernization of his computer systems and contractors and all that good stuff. But what I want to do is remind the American public that the number one goal, in my view, of the federal government is to protect us. Without national security, Social Security and every other social network hangs in the balance. There are people out there that would destroy our way of life if they could, and we need to make sure they can't do that. So let's talk about defense spending in historical terms. First, let's talk about threats. Now, this is since April. We've had Russian bombers test us since March of 2021 in Alaska at historic levels. We had 25 Chinese warplanes enter into Taiwan's defenses in April of 2021, a major escalation. There are 80,000 Russian troops massed on the Ukrainian border. There were 100,000. They say they've withdrawn. They've gone from 100 to 80. From Somalia to Mali, Nigeria, and Mozambique, ISIS in that part of the world is on the rise. We just had over 80 people killed at a school in Kabul because a radical Islamic terrorists are trying to destroy all the gains we've made for women in Afghanistan. North Korea just fired 2 short-range missiles for the first time in more than a year. The Chinese are trying to develop a deep-water blue navy. They're building aircraft carriers, and the Russians are on the prowl. And I fear ISIS and al-Qaeda will come roaring back if we don't watch it. I haven't mentioned anything about the current conflict between the Palestinians and the Israelis. So this is a time of great peril. What should we be doing? We should have a defense budget that deters war, and if you enter into one, you win it. Let's go to the next chart. Last year, the Defense Department produced a 5-year spending plan to keep modernization and replenish the weapon systems that have been worn out since 9/11. Mr. Chairman, our military men and women have been deployed more since 9/11 than any time since World War II. We've flown the wings off the planes. Our equipment has been heavily utilized, and our people have been really borne the brunt of this war on terrorism and other conflicts. So they projected in the 5-year plan that we'd be spending $722 billion this year. The Biden budget is $715. My good friend Senator Sanders has an amendment to cut the defense budget by 10%, would put us at $660 billion, way below the projected defense needs according to the Pentagon over the next 5 years. Now, in terms of GDP spending, you spend on the defense what you need to protect the nation. In World War II, we're up to 41%. We had a worldwide war. The world was at risk. Life as we know it was hanging in the balance, so we went all in to win World War II. Everybody did what they had to do. Korea, we 14% of GDP on that conflict. during the peak of the Cold War is about 10% to make sure that the Soviet Union did not gobble up the world and keep communism at bay, and I would say it worked. Now, from Vietnam up to the end of the Cold War, we were spending about 4.9% of GDP. When the Berlin Wall fell, we started coming down. And on September the 10th, 2001, we're at 3.11% of GDP, an historical low. The peace dividend didn't last very long, did it? The global war on terror, something nobody really thought about, and how do our weapon systems relate to that conflict? We've been at about 4.6%. We're withdrawing our forces from Afghanistan. We're going to be at about 3.4%, going toward 3.3%. So here's what I would say. We're on the low end of defense spending, but we're on the high end of the threat matrix. Personally, I've never seen more capability aimed at the United States than I do right now. You see Iran getting stronger, not weaker, when it comes to their military misadventures. You see them enriching. Let's put that up. No, excuse me, the sequestration thing. Iran is enriching at 60%. I want to remind you that just a few years ago, we went through an event called Sequestration, where we were going to take $1 trillion out of the defense budget as some budget deal as a punishment for not reaching a budget number. Sequestration, according to General Mattis, for all the headaches caused by the loss of our troops during these wars, no enemy in the field has done more to harm the readiness of our military than sequestration. Remember the good old days of sequestration? They were horrible days. We're having to cannibalize weapon systems to keep them going. It was a nightmare for the Pentagon. I asked Secretary Panetta, a Democrat, who's a fine man, if we enact sequestration, would we be shooting ourselves in the foot? He said, we'd be shooting ourselves in the head. Sequestration was an effort to just blindly cut $1 trillion from the Pentagon, and it made us less capable at a time we needed more capability. So to those who are watching today, half the money we spend virtually is on personnel costs, $50 billion, and the Pentagon goes to health care costs. I think Senator Sanders is right to be asking the Pentagon to be more accountable and transparent, but I think it is a very dangerous idea to suggest that our defense footprint, given the threats we face, needs to be changed in terms of less. I think it needs to be more in terms of capability to deal with the multiple threats we face, but that more should be wisely spent. So this is a great debate we've been having for a long time, but the facts are the facts. Given the world we face, we're on the low end of spending at a time when our enemies are on the high end of misadventure in spending. The one thing you don't want to do, Mr. Chairman, is have the enemy miscalculate and entice them to make mistakes that could cost us all by not being ready to meet the challenges. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Graham. We have an excellent panel today. I think we have 4 panelists who are here. One will be virtually. Larry Korb is a senior fellow at the Center for American Progress. He formerly served as President Ronald Reagan's Assistant Secretary of Defense from 1981 to 1985. Bill Hartung is the Director of the Arms and Security Program at the Center for International Policy. He is the author of a number of books. Mandy Smithberger is the Director of the Center for Defense Information at the Project on Government Oversight. She has previously worked in the House of Representatives and served as an analyst at the Defense Intelligence Agency and the U.S. Central Command. Roger Zakheim is the Washington Director of the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. He previously served as General Counsel and Deputy Staff Director at the House Armed Services Committee, as well as Deputy Assistant Secretary for President George W. Bush. Lieutenant General Thomas Spohr is the Director of the Center for National Defense at the Heritage Foundation. He previously served in the U.S. Army for 36 years, during which he was Commandant of the Army's Chemical, Biological, Radiological, and Nuclear School. So this is a very strong panel. Let's begin with Larry Korb. Larry?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman,